So I just want to say welcome or welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. If you're a fanatic of everything entertainment, then this is the channel for you. But anyways, we are talking 1954's Godzilla or Gojira. So let's get into it. So before I get into it, I want to touch upon a couple of things really quickly. I just want to say thank you for the love and support that you showed for my Godzilla Minus One review. That's gotten over 500 views now, which is absolutely awesome. And one more thing, if you were here recently, then you know that I have a community tab up that asked you guys if you wanted me to talk about the Godzilla films in chronological order or go from newest to oldest or just have like a scattered review series. Most of you guys surprised me and said newest to oldest, which I decided against doing that. I was going to do it, but I've had a few people reach out in the comments with lengthy comments, and they insisted I go chronologically, and it does make a lot more sense to do it that way because, that way we can get into, the Showa era and then go forward, and then also just to pay respects to this film that started it all in 1954. This is the longest running series ever. 70 years. That is crazy, man. Like, I can't believe that. The MCU is only like a little over 15 years old. X-Men went on from like, what was it, 2000 to 2020 something. So like a lot of franchises haven't been around that long, and Godzilla is the longest running series that there is. And of course, I wanted to pay my respects to where it all started. But with that being said, let's get into the positives. My first positive is the fact that Godzilla is an allegory for nuclear testing. As some may know, the director Ishiro Honda was drafted into the Imperial Japanese Army. In short, he was sent to the front lines of Japan's invasion of China, and he was recalled to military service several times for a total of 3 tours and 6 years at the front lines. Because of his time in the military, Honda suffered from nightmares about the war throughout his life, and I believe he incorporated elements of that into this film. And with it being 1954, Japan was still dealing with the nuclear fallout with, horribly disfigured survivors of the atomic blast and sickness from radiation. And with Godzilla being a sea creature, there is a couple of scenes shot underwater, and for 1954, they were decent. It's pretty good. Like, I give massive respect because the only way that I'd be able to do it is with a GoPro or just like those certain containers you can put your phone in. So I give massive props, but it's nowhere near as good as The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Those underwater shots were phenomenal. That whole series, or at least the first 2 films in that series, phenomenal. This pales in comparison, but it's still pretty good for 1954. Also, I like that this film has Godzilla in nighttime scenes like 80% of the time, and it helps to mask the goofy design that is the design of Godzilla in here, which I will get into the mix section. But I'm mostly a fan of seeing a man in a suit destroying a heap of models. While it's very noticeable, it doesn't really bother me because how else would have it been achieved in 1954 other than this in stop motion? I like most of the miniature scenes in here because it's very nostalgic to me. Even though I am 25, I still have some nostalgia with that. Mainly because I used to watch The Three Stooges growing up, and there's a heap load of scenes in that series that use miniature models, and it never bothered me then, and it doesn't bother me now. It's just the fact that, like, I'm a fan of it. It might, it might turn some people off, but not me. And it's real stuff being destroyed. Like, if this was a modern film, it'd be straight up CGI. So, like, this is real stuff being destroyed. After seeing Godzilla Minus One, there is a lot of scenes that film paid homage to with this film. And, whether it be the setting, showing Odo Island, Godzilla taking a bite out of a train, and both ending with a boat on the sea. It's nice to see where these homages came from and where it all began. I like that this film has a lot of wide lens shots used throughout the film, and there's plenty of different angles that they show when Godzilla's going on a rampage, and I'm a fan of that. So I will mispronounce this name, but one of my favorite characters has to be Dr. Serizawa, mainly because he allows his weapon, the oxygen destroyer, to be used only once, and he destroys years of notes to make sure that no one else copies his work once he goes with Godzilla. Like, he kills himself in order for no one else to use or make a copy of the oxygen destroyer, which I was a really big fan of that element. And it really, not saying it pulled at your heartstrings, but it put a lot more impact onto the ending. But like I said, other people could have, used that weapon to destroy the world or have another nuclear fallout. And the fact that we have Godzilla as a threat in here, that was one of my favorite elements of Godzilla Minus One, and it's one of my favorite elements of this film because in both of these films, like, you can feel the presence of Godzilla. He is this sinister being that you do not want to cross paths with. His presence is looming throughout the entire film, regardless if he's on screen or not. Dr. Yamane is another favorite character of mine because he's a zoologist and he doesn't want to kill Godzilla because Godzilla is the last of his species, but also he just doesn't want to see that happen regardless. And I like at the end of the film, he says something along the lines that, if nuclear testing continues, there will more than likely be another Godzilla. Spoilers, there is. There's like 38 more films. Jesus Christ, man. With that said, let's move on to the next section. Outside of the two characters that I mentioned, I'm not entirely a fan of the characters in here. While they're finely acted, like everyone in here does a great job, I can't really latch myself into anyone else other than those two characters that I mentioned. Like, I have no complaints with any of the actors, even though some performances are a little over the top, but that's what you come to expect with the 1950s monster film. But I believe that's more of a cultural thing, because even in Godzilla Minus One, there's a couple performances in there that's a little over the top for my taste, but, I'm not entirely complaining, it's just something that I noticed. But either way, I don't hate any of the characters, I just don't catch on to anyone else other than the two that I mentioned. While the music and score by Akira Ifukube is amazing and hands down iconic, they used the main theme a total of like 5 to 6 times, and it did get old by like the third time. So like 5 to 6 times, that's absolutely crazy. I just wish they used different scores for different scenes involving Godzilla, especially when he's going on his rampage. They could incorporate something else into the mix, but regardless, it's an iconic score. That's why it's in the mix, because the score itself, when you go back and check it out, it's pretty good. Same goes for Minus One, but that's besides the point. So, Godzilla's design during the nighttime scenes is pretty good, if not decent, But certain close-ups just don't do it for me, and they are a bit goofy. And there's another daytime scene towards the beginning when you see him come over a hill. That was, I think, our first introduction to Godzilla in here, and it just, when that's your introduction to your villain in here, it's not great, but regardless, I think the use of the nighttime scenes, they mask it really well. But I can look past it because this film is 70 years old now. So with that said, let's move on to the negatives with this film. So my only complaint with this film is the editing, okay? Now, I'm not one to speak because I have made hundreds, if not thousands, of mistakes in my YouTube videos or my short films, but I'm an independent short film maker. But this is like an actual like studio where there's like over 100 people that's part of the cast and crew. And some of these, I'm not saying they're unforgivable, but some of these, like, I think they could have worked on it a bit more. Especially that infamous jump cut, which I will have on screen right here. Y'all could have just let 2 or 3 seconds slide by instead of just cutting out 2 or 3 seconds, because I'm sure she looked behind, looked back this way, and then got up, but it just looked like she looked behind and then got up. It just looked really weird. And there's this one scene where they use like a certain transition, like the slide transition, like 4 or 5 times within 20 to 30 seconds, and it was just really irritating for me. And that's the same for like a certain miniature scene where they use like the same airplanes like 3 times in a row. They could have just like transformed it, looked like one was coming from this side and then the next shot was coming from this side, but they all looked like this, and it was like 3 times in a row. That was just really noticeable. I'm not saying it's unforgivable, but if I noticed that, I know anyone else would. So with that being said, I'm going to be giving Godzilla, or Gojira, an overall grade of an 82%. It might not be for everyone, especially modern audiences, because 1, it's a foreign film, 2, it's in black and white, and 3, not all the practical effects hold up. But I do recommend everyone watch Where It All Began, and you need to at least watch this film at least once in your lifetime. But as always, I just want to say thank you for everything you do, and with that being said, I hope to see you in the next video.